everyone, and welcome to this week's webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about whether you should be paying off your mortgage or trying to invest that money instead. It's a question I get all the time, whether it's working with court reporters or any of my clients, where they want to know what is the best place that they should be putting their money. And maybe they're doing a lot of good things to their financial plan already. And so they're not sure yet if they're ready to start focusing on paying down debt and prioritize that, or if they should be looking elsewhere with the money that they have available each month to save. So we're going to dive in today and talk a little bit about when to choose one versus the other. And I'll show you some examples. And then there'll be a special gift that we'll give away at the end where you can go through and plug your own numbers in and see for yourself. So let's dive right in today. All right. So to kick us off, why is this important, right? Why do we want to care about this? For court reporters specifically, one thing that I see is that with the variable income streams, you can have like feast or famine work cycles and fluctuating income and your expenses. A lot of times court reporters are like, how can I lower my expenses as fast as possible to be on track for my retirement plan and not have to worry if I'm not earning money? So if I can get rid of my mortgage, I need less per month to live, and that'll free up some capital for me on a monthly basis and free up my cash flow a little bit. So I do get that a lot. However, that's not always the best financial strategy to try and pay down this debt as fast as you can. What is the quick and easy way to know which one you should focus on? I call it the 6% rule. And as you could guess, 6% for me is the deciding factor on whether I should be focusing on paying down debt faster or look at building investment accounts instead. So for most people with your mortgage, you're going to be under this 6% threshold. And the way that I like to think about this is think about if you had an investment account, and we'll go through this an example here in a second, but if you have an investment account earning 7%, or you have a loan that's costing you 4%. That's a difference that you're profiting of 3% per year by not rushing to pay down that debt, right? Because you're paying 4% for the debt, but then the money that you would have used to pay it down is earning you 7. So you're getting that kind of arbitrary difference there on the two numbers, and we can take advantage of that. So typically 6% is really where I draw the line. And the reason being how I get to this number is first and foremost is just straight up, we need to beat it from a rate of return standpoint. But secondly, when you do invest, there's taxes for the gains that you have in the account. So you're going to owe taxes on the money that you earn. When you got to pay those taxes, we got to make sure that after you've already factored in those taxes and inflation, any of those other factors, you're still doing better with the investment strategy. So if you're earning 8% in your investment account and you have 6% debt, then there's enough gap there. The reason why I like 6% is just because to me, if we can earn over 6% in the market, we're doing great. And that's going to be a pretty aggressive investment strategy. But as that number starts to go up, let's say you had debt that was costing you 10% per year, that's a lot harder to beat consistently in the market, right? I don't know if every year or over a certain time period, we're going to average better than 10% factoring in taxes and some of these other pieces as well. So 6% is where I feel comfortable that with the right investment strategy and the right investment timeline, we can do better than the market long term. Anything more than that, I don't want to risk it. And we're probably better off just paying down that debt and getting rid of it. So let me pull up here the Excel sheet that I have that I put together. And this talks a little bit about the differences and giving you a direct comparison here. I plugged in a mortgage of $750,000 mortgage. I have an annual interest rate here. I did a really high percentage to see a difference of 7.5%. I think even if you were to get a mortgage right this second, it probably wouldn't be this high, but it definitely got to this peak in the last year. I did a traditional 30-year loan. And then I said, okay, what if we have $500 a month extra that you can save toward your financial plan? Where should we put that $500? On the right here, I have the annual rate of return of our investment strategy. And for this, I put in a conservative 7% here to really show a difference. And so I want to show first what it would look like to pay off your mortgage faster. So if you go to this summary right here, you'll see that you'll be paying 57.44 per month, and you'll see the difference of 5,200, right? So basically they're saying that this is what your standard mortgage payment would be, and then they're just adding that extra $500 that you said you had available to save on an ongoing basis. So with that extra $500 that you're saving, if you did this from day one for 30 years over the course of the loan, you would actually pay off your loan in 23 years or a little bit less than that. And you would save $300,000 in interest, right? So when I say that, people are immediately, okay, that sounds great, right? I'm saving 300,000 in interest, and that's all I care about is the interest money saved. But again, it's not the interest savings that matters. It's what you could do with that money instead and what you could earn with that money if you didn't put it toward paying off the mortgage. So in this example, you can see we have the investment return is lower than the interest rate here. And so as I mentioned, anything over 6%, we would want to rush to pay off. And you can see that difference in the chart here on the right, right? The blue is these are your investment accounts. So the blue here on the bottom is that you're not investing any money until you pay off the loan. So at year 23, you pay off the loan. And then as soon as you pay off the loan, you're taking all that $500 a month that you had, plus your entire mortgage payment that you were doing, and you now get to save all of that money until you reach that 30-year mark. So that's the first strategy here, and you can see that leads to more money. The alternative, the green, that's just $500 a month for 30 years. So you just took that extra 500, you added it to this account for 30 years. At the end of that time period, you'd end up right here at about 600,000, 620,000 is what it says right here. Again, still great, but you can see in this scenario, it was actually better to overpay the mortgage. Now, let's show a scenario that's much more likely, which is that you refinanced during COVID times and you got a nice low interest rate of, say, 3% on your loan, right? You just renewed, so it's a 30-year loan from 2020. Maybe you're not sure if you're even going to live that long, right? And so you want to overpay on this loan and pay it down. But this is a great example of how much more benefit you can get from investing this money instead. So now if we go back to this chart here, we could see the difference between the blue of overpaying the debt and paying that down versus the green of investing that money is significantly different. So again, here, your interest savings, if you did rush to pay down the loan, would be $86,000 of interest saved, and you would pay off the loan in 24 years. But what I want to do is I want to actually go down here. This is all the numbers laid out, the math behind the chart that you saw. But if we just go right here to the very bottom of this, is showing on the left, this is your investment if you just did $500 every single month. And on the right is rushing to pay down the loan as fast as you can. So just this difference you can see here between the two is a difference of almost $300,000 more that you would have at the end of that 30-year period. Of course, I like this a lot more. That's $300,000 difference in your financial plan. There's also another huge benefit to doing the investment strategy, which is that if you do the investment strategy, you have the money at all times in your possession. So you could be going along right here and you could get to year 24, 25 right here, where if you look right here, you're at 419,000 and your loan is way less than that at this point. You could just pay off your loan all at once, right? Whenever you want, you have the money still available to just dump into the mortgage. So if you change your mind later, you have complete control and flexibility in this. On the opposite side, if you rush to pay off your mortgage, you can't call the bank and say, hey, I need 50 grand back. I need to buy my kid a new car or pay for their college. It's not going to happen, right? Once you put that money toward the loan, they're going to want you to get out like a HELOC or an equity loan. And that's going to open up a whole can of worms, especially today with how high interest rates are. So by going the investment route, you're also just keeping a lot more money in your possession to be able to have that flexibility. So going back to the slide deck here, as we continue on, as I mentioned, mortgage rates right now are very high with interest rates. So you can see today's rates are around 6.5 to 7.5%. So if you were to get a mortgage today and want to decide on this, you would be above that 6% threshold. So as long as you're not refinancing for the time being, then I would probably focus on paying that down. However, for most of you, you probably refinance, like I mentioned during COVID times. You won the mortgage lottery. It's why people aren't selling their homes right now. It's because you're getting this 2 to 4% interest rate that you're never going to get again. So we get to take advantage of that. Lastly, of course, is 7% or mortgage. And if you're over, you definitely want to focus on paying that down as fast as you can. Also, some things to consider here are the taxes. So this is actually a big emphasis when it comes to mortgages specifically, when you're looking at whether you should focus on paying down the debt. First and foremost, we have the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was passed. And one thing in there that I mentioned in a previous webinar is that the SALT deduction got increased to $40,000. So that's your state and local taxes. And this is basically going to open up the door for a lot more people to take the itemizing versus taking the standard deduction like they used to previously, especially if you guys are in California and you have really high income taxes. Well, all those state income taxes up to 40 grand can now be included as a deduction on your mortgage, or as a deduction on your federal income taxes. Whereas previously it was only a $10,000 limit. So you would hit that limit very fast, and then you would only have your mortgage interest to get you to the standard deduction of 30 grand. Now you could be maxing out your SALT deduction here of $40,000, plus you get to deduct up to $750,000 mortgage interest on top of that as well. So you could be looking at 50 grand or even more than that of deductions on your taxes, where maybe you were taking the standard deduction previously, which I believe last year was around 28 grand for married filers. And now you could be taking a itemized deduction of 50 grand, right? That could be a huge impact. And we want to take advantage of that. Also, you got to keep in mind that if you are contributing to retirement instead, right? If you're trying to decide between putting money toward retirement or putting money toward a mortgage, putting any money toward retirement is also going to be a tax deduction for this year as well. So even more taxes. So by choosing investments over mortgage, you're getting a tax deduction potentially for your retirement contribution, and you're keeping your mortgage interest higher, which is all going to be a deduction if you're able to itemize. So keep in mind that, those numbers I mentioned, that 6%, that's a starting point. But I just put here, if your interest rate's 2.5%, but then you're deducting that from this itemized deduction list that you get, your true interest rate could actually be under 2% when you factor that deduction in. So it's definitely something to think about. This is almost free money to have a loan that could be under 2%. We do not want to try and rush to pay that off. So when to invest instead, like I mentioned, if your mortgage rate's below 6%, especially below 4%, it's a no-brainer. We want to make sure that you have your emergency fund built up, of course. This is really something we can only do when you've checked all the other boxes. We don't want to put the cart before the horse here and start investing when you don't have anything in savings. If you're behind on retirement, you may want to even focus on this regardless of what your mortgage interest rate is. Just keep building for retirement instead. And then lastly is you got to make sure that you can handle the risk of the market, right? It depends what investment strategy you're doing and how aggressive you're going. But regardless, there is going to be market fluctuation. So you need to make sure you're prepared for that. I also wanted to mention that although I would typically recommend that you go one route or the other, if you're not fully there yet, you could even do a hybrid approach where maybe you're putting some money toward the mortgage and some money toward the investments. Like I mentioned, for 90% of the people out there, it will be a waste in my eyes to pay off that mortgage faster versus building that investment account. But if you're not there emotionally and ready to just 100% commit to investments instead, then we can do that to start with and then adjust that ratio over time. And maybe slowly you'll get more and more comfortable when you start to see the investment benefits and slowly stop paying down extra toward your mortgage. So some special situations to think about. Number one, I mentioned if you're nearing retirement and everything's looking good on your financial plan and you don't really need to contribute more toward retirement, you may want to just try and pay off the mortgage anyways, just to, again, remove that cash flow item as you go into retirement. And if you can remove a few $1,000s of monthly income need in retirement, that might just give you some extra peace of mind and comfort. Also, student loans, credit cards, anything like that, if you have the same higher interest rate, credit cards are a no-brainer at 25% interest rate, sometimes 30%. You would want to just pay those down as fast as possible. You don't want to be investing and also have credit card debt at the same time. It's completely counterproductive to be able to doing that. And then also if you're moving soon, right, if you're going to be getting a new mortgage and starting over, you probably don't really care that much to be like overpaying and paying that down. So definitely something to keep in mind there as well. Some common mistakes to avoid. I actually just mentioned this one. You don't want to be investing and carrying credit card debt at the same time. I do see this every once in a while, and it makes sense because you're just focused on building investments, but it's not adding up. You need to focus on credit card debt that's costing you 25% interest before you worry on investing and earning 8 to 12%. Also, neglecting retirement accounts. We want to make sure we avoid that. Again, if you have a high interest rate, I would probably still focus on retirement and not pay down that high interest mortgage if you're behind on retirement. The mortgage you can keep paying through retirement, but you're not going to be able to retire if you don't have at least the starting assets to be able to cover your lifestyle. And then lastly is planning without an emergency fund. If you're ready to start investing, but you don't have any emergency fund money built up, we can't get started just yet. You got to make sure you have the emergency fund dialed in before you go from there. So key takeaways from today is that 6% rule is that deciding factor. If you wanted to schedule a one-on-one consultation or ask me any questions further, feel free to reach out through my email I have here on this slide. Other than that, I am happy to give away the Excel sheet that I showed you today. So you can plug in your own retirement numbers and plug in your own mortgage numbers and run different scenarios and see what different options can lead to for yourself. So if you do want that Excel sheet, just go to this website, my website, traction-wealth.com/mortgage, and you'll just plug in your name and email and I'll send that over to you and you can have that on file and be able to use it for yourself. So that's everything I wanted to go through today. Definitely reach out if you have any questions. Feel free to post any questions in the comments as well. Other than that, I'll see you all next time.